I hope you're doing well and welcome to the Horn Broadcasting Channel. My name is Mtalam Kosia. The 2026 Africa Forward Summit in Nairobi was one of the most significant diplomatic and economic gatherings Africa has hosted in the recent years. Hosted by Kenya and France, the summit brought together more than 30 African heads of state, international financial institutions, investors, entrepreneurs, and global development partners. The summit was held under the theme of building equal partnership between Africa and France through innovation, investment, and economic transformation. For many observers, this summit symbolized a major geopolitical shift. For the first time in decades, France chose an English-speaking and African nation, Kenya, to host such a high-level Africa-France summit. That decision alone reflected how Africa's political and economic landscape is changing. France is attempting to rebuild its image and influence in Africa after losing ground in parts of West Africa, especially in countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and where anti-French sentiment has grown rapidly in recent years. One of the biggest achievements of the summit was the enormous investment pledges announced during the meetings in Nairobi. French President Emmanuel Macron announced investments commitments worth 23 billion euros, equivalent to 27 billion US dollars. This investment targeted sectors such as artificial intelligence, digital innovation, agriculture, clean energy, infrastructure, and health. Among the headline projects announced was the major investment in the port of Mombasa, where global shipping company CMA CGM committed hundreds of millions of euros to improve logistics and trade infrastructure. This was seen as an important step because Africa continues to struggle with the weak transport system that increased the costs of doing business across the continent. Another major success of the summit was the strong push for reforms in the global financial system. African leaders argue that African countries are unfairly treated by global lenders and international credit rating agencies. Leaders such as William Ruto emphasized that Africa is not suffering from lack of opportunity, but from the so-called rich architecture that makes borrowing too expensive for African governments and businesses. The summit strongly backed the idea of a new African financial architecture that will reduce borrowing costs and unlock investment capital. The African Development Bank supported the proposal of Pan-African Guarantee Mechanism designed to attract private investment into African economies while lowering financial risks. Many analysts believe that this could become one of the summit's most lasting outcomes if implemented properly. Another success was Africa's growing confidence in demanding equal rights instead of traditional donor-recipient relationships. Many African leaders repeatedly stressed that the continent no longer wants charity or dependency. Instead, they want investment, technology transfer, industrialization, and fair trade. The summit also focused heavily on youth, entrepreneurship, and innovation. Thousands of business leaders, startups, and young innovators participated in the forums at the University of Nairobi and other venues. Discussions focused on AI, digital transformation, creative industries, sports economy, and technology-driven job creation. For Kenya especially, the summit was a diplomatic victory. Nairobi positioned itself as a continental hub for diplomacy, technology, and investment. Kenya demonstrated that it can host high-level international gatherings and shape Africa's future and economic agenda. This elevated Kenya's image as Africa's leading diplomatic and innovation centers. However, despite optimistic speeches and major announcements, the summit also exposed several failures and unresolved issues facing Africa. One of the biggest criticisms was that many of the financial commitments remain promises rather than immediate action plans. It is argued that Africa has attended many international summits where billions are pledged, but implementation becomes slow or incomplete. Some question whether announced investment will truly reach ordinary Africans or mainly benefit multinational corporations and political elites. Another major issue that was not fully addressed was the Africa's debt crisis. Many African countries are drowning in debt payments, rising inflation, and economic pressure. Civil society groups and activists argue that the summit did not go far enough in demanding debt cancellation or major destruction of unfair global financial systems. Instead, critics say that proposals still operated within the same Western-led financial architecture, that has disadvantaged African economies for decades. The summit also fell short of security and conflict resolution. Africa is currently facing devastating conflicts in places such as Sudan, Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, the Sahel, Somalia, and parts of Ethiopia. While peace and security were discussed, the summit produced no major breakthrough strategy for ending the crisis. Many Africans expected stronger continental action plans on security, terrorism, displacement, and humanitarian emergencies. Climate financing was also discussed, but African leaders argue that wealthy countries are still failing to adequately fund Africa's climate adaptation needs. Another disappointment was the limited representation of grassroots African voices. If the investment commitments are fulfilled, if financial reforms move beyond speeches, and if African leaders prioritize accountability and regional cooperation, then the Africa Forward Summit could become a historic turning point for the continent. But if the summit remains only a diplomatic photo opportunity, with delayed promises and limited follow-up through, then many Africans will see it as yet another gathering where leaders talked about Africa's future, while ordinary citizens continue struggling with today's realities. If you've got any comments and contributions, please do so in the comment section. This is the Horn Broadcasting Channel. My name is Mtalam Kosia.